Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago.
J.D. Vance made this comment during the vice presidential debate, essentially implying that the U.S.'s epidemic of gun violence is, at least in part, to blame on Mexico and the flow of illegal firearms from Mexico into the United States.
What is wrong?
The flow of illegal firearms is, and has always been, from the United States into Mexico. And it is this flow of firearms from the U.S. to Mexico that has armed Mexico's various organized crime organizations. This is evident by the types of weapons which are confiscated from these organizations by Mexican authorities. Weapons such as the immensely popular AR-15, the M82, and the various variations of AK-style rifles. All of these are weapons which are not usually legally available to Mexican citizens due to Mexico's incredibly strict gun laws. These guns make their way into Mexico through the use of so-called straw purchases, by which individuals purchase firearms in the United States on behalf of criminal organizations in Mexico, usually storing these weapons in stash houses or handing them over to cartel middlemen who then smuggle the weapons into Mexico. In fact, Mexican drug cartels are known to pay U.S. citizens to both make the purchases as well as smuggle those weapons into the country. According to a report by CBS News, which was published on September 14th, 2023, it is estimated that anywhere between 250,000 to 1 million firearms are illegally trafficked from the United States into Mexico every year. And it is to the point where around 70 to 80% of guns captured by Mexican authorities can be traced back to the United States of America. This is something the U.S. government itself has acknowledged as an issue, with a Justice Department senior official telling CBS News that they recognize that a lion's share of firearms trafficked to Mexican cartels are coming from the United States of America. And it's no surprise considering the U.S.'s incredibly lax gun laws. One such example of this is the fact that a majority of states do not require universal background checks. This is to say that while all states require background checks when purchasing firearms from licensed dealers, most states do not require background checks when firearms are being traded between two private individuals. This loophole allows individuals to make these previously mentioned straw purchases, as the initial buyer would not need to conduct a background check or maintain a record of who they then went on to sell that firearm to afterwards. There's also the fact that in various states, one could purchase an 80% lower kit. And so long as the firearms are for personal ownership, they will not need to be serialized or registered. Combined with a lack of universal background checks, these types of weapons could very easily end up in the hands of organized crime in Mexico, with no possibility of accountability for those supplying organized crime with those weapons. And the flow of illegal firearms from the U.S. to Mexico actually increased after the end of the U.S. assault weapons ban in 2004, a ban which banned the manufacture for civilian use of certain semi-automatic firearms as well as high-capacity magazines. Prior to the end of this assault weapons ban, 25% of Mexico's homicides were perpetrated with a firearm. But by 2020, that number had increased to as high as 70%. The Mexican states most affected by this increase in gun-related violence after the end of the assault weapons bans were the 6 border states in the north of the country. Border states, which previously accounted for 14% of total national homicides from 1990 to 2006, only to then have that jump up to 30% from 2007 to 2018. And yes, obviously, the initiation of the Mexican drug war also contributed to the increase in gun violence in Mexico, but the violence was fueled and facilitated by the lax gun laws in the United States and furthermore by the expiration of the assault weapons ban, which led to an increase in the manufacture and exportation of assault weapons to Mexico. So no, JD, Mexico isn't to blame for the gun violence epidemic in the United States. The blame falls solely on the United States, its lenient firearm laws, and in particular on the GOP and its refusal to pass any sort of significant firearm reform. Likely why red states tend to have higher gun deaths than blue states.